Hello. My name is Kelly. I am 31 years old, and if you meet me in everyday life, you will see a professional, confident woman, always dressed in accordance with fashion trends and radiating calm efficiency. My work is the foundation on which I build my life, a kind of tuning fork that adjusts every minute of the day to a certain rhythm. My clients, colleagues, and friends see the results I bring, and highly appreciate my ability to work and attention to detail. It seems that everything is fine with me: stability, success, a structured life. But if someone wanted to look deeper, they would understand that behind this facade there is a completely different story. I was 17 when my mother suddenly passed away. This day has remained in my memory forever, like a scar left by a heavy blow that changed my world with my father forever. At first, helplessness, a sense of loss, a mute question in the eyes. My father, who had seemed to me the epitome of unshakable confidence, was also confused, but he gathered all his strength to stay by my side. In those first months after my mother's departure, it was as if we had lost the ground under our feet, but in our fragility, in the struggle with misunderstanding and pain, we became closer. He accompanied me to every football game, patiently sorted out my school assignments, and even tried to braid my hair, even though it was a real torture for both of us. So we, two vulnerable people, became a team, as if the world around us could collapse, but we would stand by supporting each other. As time passed, the loss was no longer so acute, but its echoes echoed inside. Now I was 31, I was sitting with Lauren, my best friend, at the table of our favorite cafe, drinking the usual latte. We were chatting about work, the latest news, and the latest career successes, when Lauren suddenly changed her tone and said, "Kelly, when are you going to get back to this?" Her words cut through the air, making me tense up. She was referring to my personal life, the one that I had avoided discussing for a long time. Lauren knew how hard it was for me to go through that relationship with Jack. She was there when I made the decision to leave. At the sound of his name, I held my breath for a second, almost choking on my latte. Jack was my last serious affair. He turned out to be a man who at first seemed perfect to me, attentive, caring, generous with warm gestures and small pleasant surprises. He gave me flowers, filled my life with a sense of care and understanding. But after a while, this concern of his began to take on other outlines. From a bright and sincere one, it began to burden. Since then, I have focused on my work, immersing myself in projects and initiatives that in previous years seemed unapproachable to me. Work became an anchor for me, a stabilizer that allowed me to escape from thoughts about the past. Clients, colleagues, teams, they were all involved in the cycle of tasks and deadlines, and it seemed to turn my everyday life into a dance, where every step was precisely calculated, every detail thought out. And it was at this moment that Paul appeared. Paul became a part of our team not so long ago, but his appearance was like a refreshing breeze. He is one of those people who always know exactly what to say to support, and when silence is more expensive than words, Paul was just there, like a quiet confidence. He is delicate, attentive, and his looks, which I caught from time to time, were filled with warmth hidden behind an invisible wall of respect. These were fleeting moments when I noticed how his eyes lingered on me a little longer than the conversation would require. And yet, despite his sincere kindness and support, I couldn't afford to take a step towards a new relationship. It was as if something inside me was holding the boundary, not allowing me to weaken my emotional armor. One evening, while I was thinking about it thoughtfully, I was interrupted by a sharp beep from my phone. It was a message from my father. He has always been more than just a parent to me. He was my friend, my mentor, someone who always knew what to say. "Hey, honey, do you have a minute?" His voice, even through the screen, sounded warm and caring. I answered immediately, asking how he was doing, and noticed a slight excitement in his voice. He paused before blurting out the news, which literally froze me in place. I'm engaged. At first, I couldn't believe my ears. The words did not want to form a meaningful sentence. Dad, who has been only mine for so long, as if life gave him a second chance at happiness. It's amazing. Dad, tell me everything. I almost shouted, joyfully and excitedly. In response, he laughed, and his laugh was filled with such a lively, youthful enthusiasm, which I had not heard for a long time. Her name is Julie. She's 42, and we met at that charity golf tournament last month. Do you know the one you couldn't come to? I smiled, imagining how he shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other, telling me about a woman who, apparently, had already taken a special place in his heart. We talked for a long time, and every moment of this conversation brought me joy, an indescribable sense of pride for him, for finding someone with whom he could share his life. When I asked when their wedding would take place, he replied that they were thinking about autumn. And then, a little hesitantly, he added, "Actually, I was hoping you could help with some planning." His words touched me to the core. Now I have the opportunity to support him the same way he has supported me all these years. The following weeks flew by in preparation for the upcoming event, and I enthusiastically took up every detail. But over time, I began to notice oddities. When I asked questions about the invited, the guest list, or even the best men, my father became somewhat evasive. "Don't worry, honey, Julie will handle most of this," he replied, as if waving it off, and I tried not to pay attention to it. But an uneasy feeling crept into the depths of my soul, the same as in those moments when my relationship with Jack began to fade and collapse. No, I told myself, this is my father, he would never keep secrets from me. However, the growing anxiety refused to go away. One day, when I went to lunch with Paul to take my mind off my thoughts and just enjoy a light conversation, he suddenly asked. Paul was chatting about the new campaign strategy. His words blended into a pleasant background, but I was only half listening, because my thoughts were increasingly spinning around my father's strange behavior. His evasive answers, his unwillingness to talk about details, all this seemed to hide something more than he was willing to admit. I tried to brush it off, to immerse myself in a conversation with Paul, but something pulled me back dully, as if a quiet voice warned me that there was something important hidden in the shadows. Suddenly Paul's hand flashed in front of my face, pulling me out of my thoughts. "Earth is calling, Kelly," he said with a smile. I blinked back to reality. "Are you okay? You look like you're a million miles away." I opened my mouth to apologize for my absent-mindedness, but at that moment a fragment of someone else's conversation caught my attention. Someone was animatedly discussing wedding plans at our table. "Can you imagine Noah's ex? Best man will be at his daughter's wedding," one of the men at the next table muttered. I felt the fork slip out of my hand, hitting the plate with a loud thud. Paul leaned over to me, frowning. "Kelly, what's wrong?" I raised my hand, asking him to wait while I tried to calm the frantic beating of my heart. "You know how it is between exes," a second voice said. "I think his name is Jack." The room began to spin, my head spun, and I barely caught Paul's words. Jack. Jack, my father's best man. I didn't even realize how I ran out of the restaurant, got into the car and raced to my father's house, feeling a whole storm of contradictions and misunderstandings inside. When I burst into the house without even bothering to knock, my father looked out of the office, his face expressing surprise. "Kelly, what happened?" I stopped in front of him, feeling a lump in my throat. "Is it true?" It came out of my mouth. "Jack is your best man?" The color slowly drained from his face. He tried to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. "How did you?" He started, but I interrupted him. "So it's true," the voice trembled like a taut string. How could you? How could you choose him after all that he did to me? My father sighed heavily, trying to calm me down. Kelly, don't take it so hard. That was many years ago. People change. Jack and I have become good friends through a new business collaboration. He's not the man he was anymore. The words fell on me like icy raindrops. Is your friendship with him more important than anything I've been through because of him? Do you really think this is just a juvenile drama? Bitterness filled my words. We both grew up, and now you can't just. I didn't finish the sentence. Instead, I turned and walked away without saying another word, leaving him behind, trying to deal with the fact that to him it seemed like just a small thing, but to me it was a pain that I had been carrying all this time. I raced through the streets with no specific purpose, trying to escape from the thought that was tearing me apart from the inside. As the hours spun, I wound around the city until I found myself at Lauren's house. She opened the door, looked at me and, without saying a word, hugged me, as if she knew that all I needed right now was her warmth and understanding. "Oh, honey, what happened?" "What is it?" she asked softly when I finally started crying. And as if an invisible barrier had collapsed, I told her everything, without holding back any words or tears that could not ease the pain. Lauren, listening to my story, grew more and more gloomy. Her face became more and more serious as I poured out my soul to her. When I finally finished, she shook her head in frustration, muttering, "This is manipulation, Kelly, pure and simple." Both of them. Then my phone vibrated in my hand. Message from Paul. He asked if I was okay. I answered briefly, inviting him to come to Lauren to explain the whole situation. When he arrived and sat down across from us, I repeated my story again, feeling the weight of the words only increase. Paul was usually light and cheerful, but this time his face became serious, and there was tension and sympathy in his eyes. "Kelly," he said, looking at me with genuine concern, "I hate to say this, but your father's behavior, it's toxic." Lauren squeezed my hand and nodded in agreement. "He makes you doubt your feelings, your beliefs," she said softly. "It's called gaslighting, Kelly. He's trying to make you feel guilty about something that's not your fault." My soul shrank, and I answered almost in a whisper, "But he's my father. He was always there for me, supported me, helped me. I don't understand why he's doing this now." Paul put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed it, making me feel his support. "I know he's your father," he said, "but right now he's not making a choice in your favor. He chooses the person who hurt you. And this is not normal." I was silent, and Paul's words echoed in me. Somewhere deep inside, I knew they were right. My father, whom I considered my mainstay, would not have done this. He would not have chosen someone who caused me so much pain. Taking a deep, ragged breath, I finally decided to say it out loud. "I can't go to this wedding. I just can't." Lauren squeezed my hand reassuringly. "You don't have to," she replied. "No one has the right to dictate to you how to live if it disturbs your peace of mind." Paul nodded, his voice full of understanding. "Your mental health should come first, Kelly. If your father doesn't understand this, it's his choice, but not your fault." Sitting there, surrounded by friends who really understand me, I felt a kind of relief. Everything still seemed difficult and confusing, but for the first time in a long time, I could breathe, letting go of at least a little oppressive heaviness in my soul. This whole situation might be complicated and unfair, but now I knew for sure that I could choose who to let control my life. The next few weeks were a real challenge. My father did not understand my decision at all. He left angry messages, called, wrote to me in a fit of frustration. I soon found out that he even shared our story online, accusing me of selfishness and ingratitude, giving it a connotation that I was unable to rejoice for the poor widowed father who finally found love. As soon as his post went viral, my phone exploded with messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. First, there were anxious questions from cousins and brothers, then accusations from aunts, sounding like, "Kelly, how could you do this? He's found happiness." Messages and calls from relatives who had just learned his side of the story from my father came in waves of condemnation. "How could you do this to your father after all he's done for you?" Their words sounded like a reproach, as if I really betrayed someone who had been my support for so many years. "You're tearing the family apart," I heard over and over again, and with each phrase I wanted to scream more and more, to try to get through to their minds. After all, they don't know the whole story, they don't understand what I've been through, they have no idea what harm Jack has done to me. But reproaches and puzzled glances followed me everywhere. Even work was no longer a refuge for me, where I could hide from other people's judgments. Soon I began to notice how in the break room, as soon as I entered, people fell silent, glances quickly turned away, and a tense silence hung in the air, as if I was back at school, in those difficult years when any deviation made you an outsider, a target for gossip. I reminded myself that I was stronger than this, that there were people around me who really understood and supported me. But sometimes the feeling was so unbearable that I could barely hold back tears. And then one of those days, when I just wanted to drink coffee, hoping to hide from whispers, I heard her voice, Nicole. She didn't know that I could hear her, and she spoke loudly, adding bitterness to her words. "She's just jealous because her ex is now next to her father. She never came to terms with the fact that he left her." My hand with the mug froze, and I felt it slip out, falling to the floor with a thud. Coffee drops and shards scattered on the floor. I stood as if paralyzed, feeling the heat of embarrassment and the pain of this humiliation. People turned around, a mixture of interest and indifference on their faces, as if this was another act in their gossip theater. At that moment, Paul came out of the crowd, as if he had been there the whole time. "It's all right," he said loudly, looking around at everyone. "It's time to work." His voice was hard and cold as steel, and immediately everyone quickly turned away, returning to their duties as if nothing had happened. Paul gently took my hand and led me back to my office, closing the door behind us. "Are you okay?" His voice was full of genuine concern. I tried to nod, but my throat was so tight that I could barely hold back the tears. "I don't know how much longer I can take this," I whispered, feeling the walls around me shrink, weighing down. Paul was silent for a while, and I noticed how his gaze became a little softer. "You know, my sister went through something similar," he finally said, with deep sympathy in his voice. "Her ex was terrible too, and when she finally broke off all ties with him, half of our family sided with him instead of her." "What did she do?" I asked, feeling like I was desperately grabbing at every phrase he said, for any hope of a solution. "She went to therapy," Paul said. "It helped her realize that her feelings were real, that she wasn't crazy and that she deserved respect and support, not condemnation." These words settled in me, sprouting like seeds. A few days later, I was sitting across from Dr. Shirley, the therapist, and pouring out my soul in a way I hadn't done in a long time. The words flowed in a stream, each phrase opening the doors locked inside me anew. Dr. Shirley listens to me, her eyes are soft, and I feel that, perhaps for the first time in a long time, I am truly understood. Every time I start to doubt, think about apologies, imagine how easy it is to give in to put an end to this family chaos, memories of the past pop up in my memory. I remember how it was with Jack, how I lost myself, letting him control my thoughts and feelings, how I dissolved into his toxicity. This lesson has become clear to me. I will not go back to this ever again. At work, Paul remains an unwavering support for me. When he hears whispers and discussions behind my back, he immediately cuts them off, preventing these gossips from turning into something more. On the most difficult mornings, he appears with coffee, silently leaving it on my table, giving me a sense of care and peace. Something special is emerging between us, but now I realize that I need time for myself to restore my boundaries, to find that part of myself that I almost lost in this endless maelstrom of other people's expectations and demands. My father's wedding day is inexorably approaching, and the pressure on me is increasing every day. One evening, Julie, his fiancée, comes to my apartment. Her face expresses a mixture of pleading and concern. "It would mean so much to your father if you came to the wedding," she says, her voice almost pleading. "Can't you put your problems aside for one day?" I take a deep breath, look at her, and answer firmly, "Julie, I'm sorry, but no. My mental health is important to me, and I can no longer compromise." For the first time in a long time, my soul feels calm. I feel confident in my decision. Later that night, while browsing the feed on my phone, I notice an advertisement urging me to get to know myself in Singapore. My gaze lingers on the screen, and suddenly I realize what I need to do. The next morning, I go to my boss's office. "I would like to take a leave of absence for personal reasons," I say, feeling calm in my decision. 3 weeks, starting on the 19th. My boss looks up from the documents, looking at me over the top of his glasses. "But isn't this the day of your father's wedding?" I nod slightly. "Yes, that's right. It's time for me to do something for myself." She looks at me silently for a few seconds, and then nods. A warm understanding flashes in her eyes. "You deserve it. I'm booking a flight to Singapore this afternoon." With the click of the confirm button, a long-term burden seems to fall off my shoulders. For me, this journey is not just an escape, but the first step to a new life, to freedom, to discovering myself. For the first time in a long time, I feel an indescribable excitement, as if a whole new chapter full of possibilities is opening up in front of me. That evening, I meet with Lauren and Paul to celebrate together, and when I tell them about my decision, I see their eyes widen in surprise. Lauren squeals with joy. Her smile is full of inspiration. "Girl, this is amazing," she exclaims, hugging me. Paul looks at me with a warm, proud smile and says, "I'm really proud of you, Kelly. This is a big step." We raise our glasses, clinking glasses to new beginnings, to friendship, which not only helps us cope with difficulties, but also gives us strength to move forward, no matter what. When I get off the plane in Singapore, a feeling of freedom awakens in me, as if I left all the accumulated cargo somewhere far away. 3 weeks among the streets and gardens of this city filled me with peace. The chaos and drama of recent months have faded into the background, turning into distant memories. I'm standing by the luggage belt when my phone vibrates, a message from Lauren. "A complete disaster," she wrote. "Your father got drunk and spilled all his secrets. It turns out he wasn't as perfect as everyone thought. Julie left him before they could even say yes. And guess who's involved in this? Jack. He ruined everything." I read her words and suddenly realized that I feel neither anger nor gloating. Just a strange calmness and understanding that I no longer need to look back. This is the completion I've been looking for so long. Upon returning home, the months fly by rapidly. The work is going great, and I have completed one of the most significant projects in my career. Shortly after that, my boss calls me to her office. She smiles, and there is warmth and respect in her voice. "Kelly, we're promoting you to creative director. You deserve it." I can hardly believe my ears. All these years of hard work, searching and doubt seem to have finally borne fruit. Now I have been given the opportunity to mentor young employees, and I share with them what my trials have taught me. After one of the meetings, a young intern comes up to me, her eyes full of gratitude. "Your story inspired me," she says. "Now I realize that I don't have to stay in a relationship with someone who doesn't respect me." These words touch me to the core. Realizing that my path can help others brings me an indescribable feeling of healing. And so, one evening, when I return home, the door of my apartment opens, and I see in front of me my father. He looks noticeably older, his eyes have dimmed, and his face shows signs of fatigue. "Kelly, honey, can we talk?" "What is it?" he asks, timidly, with a note of uncertainty in his voice. I let him into the apartment, but I keep my distance, allowing him to feel that he no longer has the same influence on me. He looks down, sighs heavily, and begins, "I'm sorry that I made so many mistakes. Jack, he manipulated me, and Julie." I gently raise my hand to stop him. "That's enough, Dad. You still don't take responsibility for your actions, for your choices." He freezes for a moment, his shoulders slump, and he looks completely broken. "I just want my little girl back," he whispered, barely able to contain his emotions. I take a deep breath, feeling an unyielding confidence building up inside me. "Dad, I'm not the little girl you knew anymore. I am a woman who has learned to appreciate herself. I don't need your approval anymore. And no matter how painful it is, I don't need you in my life." I say these words softly but firmly, and a light, confident smile appears on my face. "I wish you all the best," I said to my father, and with this farewell, my heart finally felt better. Time passed, filling my life with new events and emotions, and soon the day came when I turned 33. Lauren and Paul threw a surprise party for me, and when I looked at their smiling faces, my heart was filled with gratitude. They were there for me at every difficult turn, supporting me when I needed it most, and now, finally, I could feel free from the past. While I was cutting the cake, Lauren took me aside, her eyes shining with mischief. "Did you hear that?" she asked, barely suppressing a smile. "Jack was arrested for fraud, and your father's business is being investigated. It seems that the ideal life turned out to be far from perfect." I just smiled. This time, the news left me indifferent. I was with those who loved and supported me, and I was proud of who I had become. My life was moving forward, and this feeling of freedom was wonderful. Later, holding a fork with a piece of cake halfway to my mouth, I noticed that Lauren was staring at me intently. "Are you okay?" she asked with a soft excitement in her voice. I thought about it before answering, "Yes. I'm not happy about what happened to them, but I understand that life puts everything in its place. Sometimes people get what they deserve. Just 3 years ago, I was confused and scared, letting other people's words determine who I was and what I was worth. I didn't know how to defend my boundaries. I let others make decisions for me. But today, I'm different. Today, I am surrounded by true love and the support of friends, and I can be proud that I have found my strength and learned to appreciate myself. Raising my glass, I make a toast to all of you who have been part of my journey. Thank you." My friends smile back, and I feel very grateful to them, knowing that these people are my real family. Then I add, my voice trembling a little, and to all those who are going through difficult times: hold on, remember that you are stronger than you think. Time heals, and everything will get better. And yet, even after all this, somewhere deep down there remains a question that I have not yet found an answer to. Was it right to completely exclude my father from my life? Or maybe I should have given him another chance. Family remains a family. We are taught to forgive and accept our loved ones, despite their mistakes. But on the other hand, Toxic behavior does not become less destructive just because it comes from a loved one. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you keep your distance or try to find a way to reconciliation? I'm still not sure if I made the right choice.